Hi guys and welcome to Drum Dog. Today we are looking at the 6 most common reasons your snare sounds like shit. So we are looking purely at tuning mistakes today, so we're not going to be covering whether your head's knackered or your wires are actually broken or if your hoop's all out of round. We're purely looking at mistakes made while tuning. Right, number 1, and this is the most common tuning mistake. I see people making it all the time, and it's just having the resonant head not tuned high enough. Now, even if you're aiming for a really low and fat snare sound, if you don't have that bottom head cranked up, you're not going to get the wires to respond in any sensible way. Now, the most common symptom of this is the wires buzzing after every snare hit, and people often resort to adding dampening to the bottom head to deal with that, which can just worsen the effect and get a really dead sound. Moving on to number 2. Now this is a really easy one to miss, but can really cause havoc with your snare sound if not set up properly. And that is aligning the wires on your bottom head. Now what I mean by that is spacing the same distance from the butt end of the wires to the bearing edge on both sides. If it's pulled more one side than the other, you can get a lot of sympathetic buzzing after your snare hit, similar to not having the bottom head tight enough. Now this really is one to keep an eye on because as your wires stretch over time, it will go out of alignment again, so it's worth checking regularly. Now number 3 is also to do with the snare wires, and it's something that a lot of people do to try and deal with issues of points number 1 and 2. And it's cranking up the wires to be too tight. Now even if you're after a really tight snappy snare sound, there's a point where cranking the wires any further just stifles the sound. Now number 4 is a mistake that can be made while you're actually changing or fitting drum heads, and that is not seating the head correctly. This can really start causing havoc when you're tuning and you're trying to match the pitches of all of the lugs, as one side's going to be under much more tension than the other side, even though they're generating the same pitch. Now to stop this from happening, all you've got to do is be careful that when you're fitting the head, the gap between the bearing edge and the hoop is the same on opposite sides all the way around the drum. Now you're going to feel that sometimes the gap is smaller as the hoop's not always perfectly round with the shell, but as long as the gap's same on opposite sides all the way round, the head's seated correctly. Now number 5 brings us onto the tuning range of the top head, and the common mistake is tuning it too low. Now again, even if you're after a really low, deep, fat snare sound, you're not going to tune this top snare head as low as you would tune a low-tuned tom. Now the overall tuning range of a snare from super low and fat to really cranked is still higher as a bracket than the tuning range of a tom. You wouldn't tune a low tuned snare as low as you would tune a tom batter head, but in the same sense you wouldn't tune a high tuned tom as tight as you would crank a snare. So that whole tuning range really does sit a lot higher compared to the tom tuning range. Now the sixth and final point for this video brings us to dampening. And the mistake is not using dampening just on principle. Now there's this hilarious rumour doing the rounds amongst drummers that if you can tune, you shouldn't have to use dampening, and that people who use dampening only use it because they can't tune. That is just wrong. You can have a perfectly tuned snare and it will always ring unless you add dampening. Now for some tunes that could be perfect and you want that really open sound, but for some tracks you're not going to want that and you are going to want to add some dampening. There is definitely such a thing as over dampening and you're really killing that head, but I mean, I've got 2 moon gel on this snare, which for me sounds just perfect, and that's definitely not too much. Don't be scared of using dampening just because someone on a forum says that it makes you bad at tuning. Let us know in the comments your favourite snare sounds, whether that be a drum of your own or your favourite sound on a record. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you liked this video, and we'll see you for the next one.